I'd like to welcome you all to Digital Photography's I3 lecture series. We are so thrilled to have Milagros de la Torre as tonight's guest speaker. Milagros was born in Lima, Peru, where she studied communication sciences at the University of Lima and later photographic arts at the London College of Printing. Her first solo exhibition, Under the Black Sun, was curated by Robert Del Pir and presented at the Palais de Tokyo, Paris. Since then, her work has been exhibited at the International Center of Photography, el Museo del Barrio, the Art Institute of Chicago, the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, Phoenix Art Museum, Museum of Contemporary Art San Diego, and Museo Reina Sofia, among many others. Recent solo exhibitions include Observed, curated by Edward Sullivan at the American Society in New York, and a mid-career survey, Indicios, at the Museum of Art in Lima. Observe received glowing reviews by Art in America, The New Yorker, The Wall Street Journal, Jeu de Paume Museum Magazine, Art Nexus, and Arte al Día. Milagros has been a resident artist at Cité des Arts, Paris, and received grants, awards, and fellowships from the Rockefeller Foundation, the Romeo Martinez Photography Prize, the Young Ibero-American Creators Prize, and the Guggenheim Foundation. Among others, her work is included in the collections of the Art Institute of Chicago, el Museo del Barrio, Museum of Fine Arts Houston, Harvard Art Museum, Fonds National d'Art Contemporain, and Museo Reina Sofia. So please help me welcome Milagros to our lecture series.
Thank you for a great introduction, Jaime, and thank you for the School of Visual Arts for having me tonight. Because of your initiative, I hope that we have, rather than a presentation, a dialogue and an exchange of ideas. And I would love to just go through some of the series that I've been working on for over, now it's going to be 20 years. And at the end of the session, please feel free, if you have any questions or remarks or opinions, I would welcome those very much. Good evening. I'm going to most probably the events that occur during the first 18 years in an individual's life become the most significant as where their decisions and life goals will lie later. I was raised during the 70s and 80s in Peru, the first child of a middle-class family amid the political and economical upheavals of military coups and dictatorships in Latin America. Nothing out of the ordinary. It was only until I left to London to continue my art studies that I realized how different from the normal my reality had been. It was all because of my father's line of work. He had been singled out as a brilliant strategist against criminality and terrorism. So much so that he was brought to Washington, D.C. to be trained and became the youngest general in the history of Peru. I remember clearly the titles of books that were in our bookshelves, all involving psychology, analysis, facts of criminology. Secret reunions in the middle of the night at our home, the lights of police cars just outside, the guns, the personal protection training, the curfews and limited electricity hours, the daily changing of the route to go to school, and the imminent possibility of violence were every day's routine. Both of my male grandparents wore military uniforms, and so did my father. And these were the type of images that I first recollect from those books. Images that I later recognized as the works of Cesare Lombroso, the biometrics research of French police officer Alphonse Bertillon, the work of physiognomist Johann Caspar Lavater, mugshots, tattoos of the criminal, organized crime codes, and language. Here I would like to quote Laszlo Moholy-Nagy, who during a lecture at the Bauhaus said, "He who fails to read or understand photography will be one of the illiterates of the future." Moholy's love of the camera was based on the fact that it demonstrated so persuasively that nothing was as it seemed. Putting ourselves in his time frame, one where photography was starting to become an interpretation rather than a mere document of reality, I feel compelled to make a parallel with our own recent, right here, right now, time, which was different from just a decade ago. We are obliged to look at images in a way that we have never experienced them before. As Willem Flusser notes, images are significant surfaces. They are ambiguous complexes of symbols that provide space for interpretation. One of my main concerns has been exactly the interpretation of visual language, through most notably the medium that is closest to, in quotations, reality. I finished my BA in photography at the London College of Printing in 1991, and from then on, I have been having an idyllic affair with interpretative conceptual photography, an affair that is indeed passionate, but also inquisitive and skeptical. For the first time, photography meant something else, a few steps away from what it represented. I have worked exploring the indexical character, its semiotics, its processes, formats through different photographic tactics and strategies, exploring the boundaries of photographic potentials and photographic manipulation. Followed by decisions concerning which exclusive language referenced imaginary serves best as to convey the underlying content of each series or work. I've always perceived my work as intimate and have chosen to challenge conventional photographic practice with, at times, very conventional photographic language as part of a strategy to undermine its documental role. I felt this could only be truly and subtly destabilized through its own means, and in that sense open a door to a somewhere else location, just presenting a few details in order to ignite the viewer's thought process and imagination. So now I'm going to go through a small selection of those series that I spoke to you about. This is called Under the Black Sun. It was made 1991 to 93. So this is after I finished my BA in London. I went back to Peru, and actually I went back to the mountains in Cusco, where my family originally comes from. So alongside some historical research that I made in Cusco, I worked on my first personal project, Under the Black Sun, which is based on the Minutero photographer technique. Minutero, it's related to minutes. So it's the idea of having results within minutes in photography with no Polaroids involved. These are street photographers whose main service is providing the common ID or passport photo to be used in official documents. The rudimentary and fascinating process is that they shoot directly onto photographic paper using a box camera. This paper has been roughly cut or teared by hand, so in that way economizing on material without using acetate or film as we know it. It's strange that I'm talking about these procedures to times of digital photography, but the exposed paper is developed in the camera itself with the aid of a developer and a diluted fixer that is stored in small recycled tins inside. And through some dark sleeves that they cut out from an old jacket and are fixed to the camera box, they can manipulate the paper physically. So as the paper negative is removed to dry in the mountain sunlight, a layer of mercurochrome or merbromine is automatically applied to the skin of the subject. This negative with red retouching is then rephotographed with the same camera in order to produce through the same developing process a positive or a common ID photo. This action is repeated according to the client's demand of quantity. So if you can just imagine, once this image has come out of that camera through those old sleeves, the photographer would automatically paint the face of the client with this red medicine, mercurochrome. It's normally used for cats. You know, it's a kind of antiseptic, but it tints your skin when you use it. The innocent retouching lightens the skin of the subject, producing not only a, quotes, racial improvement, but also an aesthetic, economic, and even cultural one, in the belief, probably, of colonial origin, that a person with fair skin intrinsically represents all of these qualities. These ideas are questioned in Under the Black Sun, as the process is suspended in the middle, at the negative stage, still unresolved, with the red veil covering the face of the subject. And I'll just go through some of these images. So you can have an idea of how roughly they look and they're made. Nonetheless, the fact that the red tinted is also medicine, you know, makes you think of, or makes you, think of other possible meanings or interpretations, as if the face is a wound or.
Do you mind if I ask a question?
No, not at all.
Okay, I'm curious. Did you take the pictures, or are these like found negatives that you got from the vendors?
No. I took the pictures.
On the street?
I had, yes, on the street. I used to come back and forth to Cusco, and I will show you. I think I have an image later. I used to stay in a hostel, and what you normally did was to put a backdrop, because you know Cusco is full of these stones. You know, it's built on stone. So you would put. I would take my bed sheet and put it on the plaza or on the street or any corner, and just would not only borrow the space of these street photographers, but also work there. And I did all this, I mean, technically wise, through a 4x5 Linkhoff, which I later had to pack all these pieces of papers that with the Latin image and go back to Lima by plane and develop them there, because I didn't have those wonderful old sleeves in my camera.
Well, I grew up in Callao, Peru, so I know all the story that you are talking, and I remember these street photographers,
Yes.
and I've been too many times the subject of this sort of photography, so
Yes.
I know the magic that is around there. So I was wondering if, also I have done an exhibit about that, you know, the Sendero Luminoso, shiny pattern, all
of
that
course, yes,
terrible
yes.
time that we had.
That we lived, yes.
So my question is, if at the time that you were taking these photographs in Cusco, so who were the subject of these photographs?
Mm-hmm.
One question.
Yes.
The other one, were you also with some other street photographers that were witnessing your work? And if so, what did they think, or what was their thought about this? Thank
Okay, you. So you know, as any of these Andean cities, there's the main square, which all these photographers used to work, because of course you have most of the mobilization, you know, people walking around there. So I chose not to be in that main square, and I went to, I don't know if you know, Cusco, Plazoleta de Nazarenas, which is a bit higher up. It's also a small square, so I didn't have any competition there. And as you have seen, most of the images are images of kids. Because they were curious to see what I was doing. I mean, if you can just imagine that bed sheet, you know, stuck with tape, and then the camera, and a welcome invitation for everybody to take their photograph. As they couldn't see the results, I offered them a Polaroid as an exchange. So of course I had to put all these images ready to be developed, but in Lima, not in Cusco. And here again, I am citing under the black sun. It's something that we were talking about: ideas, inspiration, images. Obviously, the inspiration came from borrowing that technique of the street photographers. The idea was to stop the process in the middle. That was the choice I made. And of course, you can see this. There's also a citing always in each series of a photographic technique, mainly gone wrong, you know, as a way of questioning just the medium. So, they are presented in very, you know, the small ID size photographs, and also life size. This piece is so in straight relationship to. Oh, here you can see the back of the policeman, and I chose to put this especially. You can see the bed sheet, which is the white and turns out to be black here, and the two policemen in there. And at the back you can see those stones I was telling you about. Okay, so this one is called "It All Stays in the Family." This project is based on a defective photographic technique, the unsynchronized flash, which results in a partially exposed negative with half of the portraits covered in a shadow that increases from gray to complete darkness, an apparently subtle and innocent approach to a very conventional family portrait, not only evoking shadowy figures of memory, which are therefore very complex in representational or even anthropological terms, but also emotional ones. So I did this project. It all stays in the family, obviously, from family portraits in '94. And this is my father, who is taken as a civilian in the top image, and as a with a military uniform the bottom, but it turned out so here again I retook I reused some IDs from the family. Top is my grandfather, and bottom is my father, and you can see that shadow. And I think it even says Cusco. Yes, it says Cusco there. So that's where he was from, Cusco, from the mountains. That's the whole family. And this is a piece with both parents. The Lost Steps are photographs of apparently innocent everyday objects that were submitted as evidence in trials for terrorist acts, crimes of passion, and other felonies. The work, again, another reference, references a 19th century photographic technical limitation when the development of a lens did not entirely cover the format of the photographic negative, hence creating a dark aura around the object, conferring on it a halo of mystery or emotional charge that alludes to the dark side of human nature embedded in these objects, also to their traces or to their gesture. This halo visually directs our eyes to the object itself. Objects are charged with human experience, and they are seen as depositories of meaning. So when I worked on the Lost Steps series, I carried and placed these testimonial materials in front of the camera. Again, a big format camera. There was an indiscernible density to them, a certain weight. They had been witnesses to some extreme event. They contain hidden crucial details. Somehow, there's a feeling that they are not just a piece of paper or a police mask in this sense, but something else hidden behind. Only when one reads a small police-like description placed under each image is when one begins to understand where the object comes from. I think there's a frontier, an in-between place within observing a photograph of an object and realizing or not what you're seeing. So this is a series of 15 images. Each of them has a small inscription, so it's actually under the image. And this one, for example, is the police mask used by Loco Perocena, which was a very well-known criminal at the time, who didn't have any photograph taken, and nobody would know exactly how he would look like. So I think somehow they found out a photograph, remote photograph, and they did this sculptural, three-dimensional mask, the police did. So after they did this exercise, they actually got him, and he died in prison. This is the shirt of the first massacre when we realized we had Shining Path terrorism group working within our frontiers. So this is called this is a journalist shirt from the massacre in Uchurajay. And these are the belts of the psychologist Mario Poggi, who had a strange history. You have to understand that these images were probably so referential to us at the moment where we were living all this violence. Just the story of these belts from this psychologist. The psychologist was supposed to see if a criminal was ready to stand trial or not. So he's taken into custody. The psychologist is called, and there are closed doors, and he has to make a reference to see if the criminal is able to have that trial, and but he just came out running, the psychologist, and saying that he couldn't bear this human person to be alive, and that he had killed the criminal with these belts. So such surrealistic stories were the ones that we were dealing with while we were, I mean, there was no cable, there was no magazine, so there was. This is a false police ID used by a terrorist. So you can see him as a civilian and as a policeman. And that's our badge to the side. And this is a flag confiscated to a Shining Path terrorist. And it's very eloquent in its simplicity. And I think it's just that chocolate, the tin that you have when you open the chocolate, you have that kind of a plate color paper. So that's what he used, and just any piece of red material. This is a test to recognize cocaine chlorhydrate. What they do is that immediately when they find a clandestine laboratory, they need to chemically prove if it's pure cocaine. And for that, they just need any type of receptacle, and they need to move it, like as if cooking. And this was all, when it turns blue, it's supposed to be pure cocaine. So just the notion that this is a chemical test, and we're just seeing a couple of forks and a spoon, is what interested me for that project. This is.
Why did you call it the Lost Steps?
Oh, the Lost Steps, Los Pasos Perdidos in Spanish, because the Palace of Justice in Lima is this beautiful 19th century neoclassical building that goes from the frontal to the back. There's a huge corridor called the Lost Steps. So from the wonderful, grandiose entrance, goes directly to the back where all the criminals are being judged and hopefully not seeing the light of day anymore. So this idea of that corridor that comes from the light towards complete darkness is the name of the series. This is called Untitled. It's a series carried out in an old house in Poland, where the family photographs were taken off the walls so that their outlines, marked by the passage of time and light, would be left visible. Shadows became a central element in these images, and in some way they create an interplay of absences and omitted presences. Untitled contains the idea of the family as a nucleus of individuals, with the inevitable feeling of emptiness generated through these new frames or reframes. So here, the only thing that's normally in focus is the nail that would hold the family portrait. And I don't know if you get to see it, but there are two shadows here, one big one and then a smaller one. So you can see that there were two different types of portraits in a long period of time. Here, I think it's better. So you see what would be a normal white wall once you take out the family portraits. Here also you can see two images, two frames were there before. This is called dactylar. And it's about the idea of the hand as an instrument that leaves prints. This image was when I came here to live in the U.S. This is my criminal record. You know, they need all your fingerprints and to check on your criminal record. But they have found out with the aid of computers that after 10 million people, your exact prints or fingerprints duplicate. So there is another person exactly as you with, you know, after 10 million people. And now they're starting to use also the bottom of the hand. So this is a small test that I did. It's it just consists of one single work with 5 photographs in it, which present in the style of a classic 3/4 portrait. You know, when we used to go to the photographer's place, you had to sit in your best angle which was normally a three-quarter portrait. It shows the evolution of different qualities and physical characteristics of armored vehicles, which are a common means of transport in Mexico City. They are the small, intimate photographic prints brings the viewer closer. I chose, whenever you are in a city such as Mexico, when you see one of these cars, the only thing you want to do is run away. I mean, cross the street, you know, because the people who deal with these cars, who drive these cars, carry very heavy guns, arms, and they tend to get very nervous. So the first thing the first way you react is, you know, you have to cross the street. So after living in Mexico for so many years, I decided to do the study. So the study comes from, it's the evolution from the 70s to today, in that three-quarter pose, if you wish. But the size of the print is just the width of the regular human face. So the print would be this size, in order that the spectator would come closer, and all that relationship of danger, you know, that we would normally have after seeing these cars would disappear. So you would actually have to come very close to the wall to have a look at the differences. I also wanted to make you know, when you have that game of you're presented two images and your eye has to find somehow the difference between one and the next. So I wanted to have that kind of game. They are all presented together, the five, and as I tell you, they're very tiny prints. That's the last one that has a laser, and I think you can survive inside for 5 days without coming out. So you would get help if somebody wants to take over your armored car. So this physical closeness generates a more pleasant relationship than the one normally formed when encountering one of these vehicles on the street, where the first reaction is to walk away. They are encyclopedic, file, or game-like images that promote a change of that perception of danger. This series is called Censored, from 2000, and it's an exploration of the notions of stroke, feature, stain, that I also proposed in projects such as the Under the Black Sun, which we just saw with the red veil of mercurochrome, or Bleus, which I will show you in a second, and more recently FF, which is a series that has an intervention of manually applied sepia. Censored was undertaken in the library of the University of Salamanca in Spain, which is the oldest library housing works of the Spanish language. They have all the first editions. And it deals with the books expurgated and repressed by the Spanish Inquisition. Images of subtle colors and a level of tense aggression and profane violence. The elegant beige of the cotton handmade paper contrasts with the intense black of the censored passages. From a distance, the photograph could be mistaken for expressionist paintings owing to the implicit gesture contained in each one of them. But a closer inspection reveals almost undecipherable texts effaced by various techniques, by simply blotting out with black ink, by crossing out the lines one by one, or by gluing paper over the paragraph to be omitted, or simply by tearing out part of the page. Recently, a friend told me that he had looked up some of the passages that were hidden under the ink, and strange enough, they weren't anything that would make the Spanish Inquisition tremble. This was supposed to be the bestseller of the times, Erasmus de Rotterdam, and they were basically passages dealing with the freedom of human will. So here I think you can see more or less the graphic idea I was telling you about. That's the studio. But even very minimal, they could even say. This is a small triptych I wanted to include just for the, because we're dealing with digital photography. It's called The Disappeared, and it's from 1998, with a specific emphasis in its visual and formal quality. The triptych, which is a large format, which is in large format and limited to the use of green and dark brown tones, exposes garments in deterioration. Implanted, almost buried, the remains seem to form geographical representations, maps, that seen from a distance propose the delimitation of large areas of vegetation and earth, as in a mappa mundi or atlas. They show traces and residues of human presences suggested by these remains of clothing in the images. The central theme of the project is the fact of disappearing, which it's very, used to be very, very close Latin American subject, but I think it's now more commonly known. So when I produced this project, I couldn't, this was the, well, it looks better here. The idea was always to have that green and that brown, but this is a very recent print that it was only, I was only able to do with digital photography. So you can see more or less how I, This is Bleus. It's a project that draws its emotional photographic force from the use of very extreme close-up images, in which it is difficult at first to distinguish what is being framed. It is only through the title of the series, Bleus, bruises in French, that the small format photographs are recognized to be contusions, right? Contusions on the skin. In Bleus, an inversion of representation is carried out. The trace of pain is transformed by photography into a subtly colorful landscape, which creates tensions between the familiar and the unexpected, between that violence and beauty, when appearances tend to deceive. Again, this is a small, they are 4 by 4 inches prints. So it's very, and it's part of an artist book that you can see here. This is called Fears. One of the new concepts that I was working on in 2004. It's a series based on a survey that I carried out among residents in Mexico City during a period of 6 months. And for the first time, a project generated or created without intervention of the camera. It focuses on the interior dialogues we all share, on the words we say to ourselves, on unspoken thoughts and anxieties. The pieces are presented as rectangular monochromes of dark brown with a hint of red, which is the first color we see when we close our eyes. We don't see pitch black when we close our eyes. We see still the light going through our eyelids, and there's that red, blood is still going through the eyelids, so that's that red tone. The pieces are presented, oh yes, these monochromes symbolize, therefore, the mental space, the inside, the inner dialogues again. The texts at the bottom are almost imperceptible unless the viewer moves up close to read them. Can you see them? We cannot see them, right, in here. So I will just give you an example of some of the texts. But here the idea is, because they are all framed pieces with glass in front, when the viewer comes closer to the piece, because of the glass and the dark of the monochrome, a mirror reflection it's created, and the viewer can actually see himself with very high detail within this dark rectangle. And then you are able to read the feelings of fear on the monochrome. So for example, this one is, it says here, just the response to my survey, that a stray bullet hits me. So that's that fear. That they robbed me coming out of the ATM, kidnapped me, and empty my account. So these are the thoughts, the inner things that are going in the mind of the. This one says that they kidnap my son, torture or kill him. That they come in to rob the house and harm the family. That I get into a taxi and I'm taken somewhere else. So that's how the exhibition looked like. When they were saying photography, everybody was a bit taken because there were just these monochromes all around the room. And that's how close you should get to be able to have that mirror effect. The next series is comprised of representations of apparently innocent, unsuspecting, everyday pieces of clothing, suspended in vacant white spaces, depicted in high detail. These well-crafted garments conceal their real purpose, which is to protect the wearer from attack by firearms. Emblematic of our times, characterized by increasing militarization and violence, new habits of consumption are being rapidly assimilated, and new products are being manufactured to service these demands. In order to deal with the climate of insecurity, personal protection prompts the consumer to acquire an extra layer of assurance and defense. So what I'm showing you here is bulletproof clothing. Manufactured in Colombia, but catering to clients as far away as Russia, South Africa, and the Persian Gulf, Miguel Caballero has been named the Armored Armani due to his discreetly styled protective garments. Not only used by politicians or the rich and famous, armored clothing is being widely adopted by ordinary citizens in crime-afflicted nations worldwide. Most recently, since last April, demand has increased exponentially to include a younger sector of the population. In the aftermath of the Sandy Hook Elementary School and the Aurora shootings in the United States, a wave of parents are willing to provide their kids with bulletproof clothing to go to school. From jackets to shirts to backpacks made specifically for children, signaling an emerging market where sales have skyrocketed. So for example, this is a lady's jacket. Or we could easily just wear a jean jacket for that case. This series includes 11 images of different pieces of clothing designed for different genders, styles, and age groups. Each image is life-sized and printed on cotton paper with a texture similar to that of the fabrics used for their manufacture. At close study, one can discover an unassuming zipper where the protective Kevlar plates are placed or removed when the garment needs to be washed or dry cleaned. A few words, almost imperceptible on the clothing label, serve as a clue towards the level of armored protection. Platinum, long-distance automatic weapons, gold, pistols and revolvers, and silver for blade weapons or common arms. The series Bulletproof explores critical issues concerning the newly projected supply-demand market of personal defense goods for civilians, where the survival of the species translates to the survival from the same species. So this would be a linen shirt that is normally used in very warm weathers. But if you just see that there's a small vest under it and there's some weight here, that would be the bulletproof vest. And we are talking about linen or cotton, so very airy shirt. That's the whole series together. Just an unassuming jacket like that, but it would say, it just says there platinum. Or probably a ladies who lunch jacket, a Chanel style jacket for a lady. So we are witnesses to a new phenomenon in the evolution of human society and culture, a global culture increasingly shaped by fear and the constant threat of violence. This is a beautiful leather jacket. I actually wore it. The leather was, you know, that creamy, soft, like a second skin leather jacket. And it wasn't heavy at all. It was, you know, portable. And well, this is for the younger generations, you know, kind of a military look. Well in fashion this season. Or the suede jacket. Or just a simple t-shirt. Like a Gap t-shirt. But there's a tiny zipper here that opens up, all the way up, so you can put the plates at the front and at the back. This is a recent project. It's called Imprint, and it's just about involuntary markings made through dental pressure on skin at moments where concentration is deeply involved in research, reading, or while writing, or assessing possibilities. They're just unconscious gestures that I started to document. So depending on the theme, the traces or the marks are deeper. That's like a landscape. Sharp-edged, and this is probably the last one, yes. It's an inventory of photographs with the appearance of a systematic serial classification of just crude, sharp-edged weapons confiscated from common criminals. These objects of unusual beauty are tinged with intense and desperate feelings of the criminal mind, where poetry and violence live calmly side by side. I was raised through my childhood circumstances to analyze, decipher clues, and now through my photographic practice and work, research, to fix shadows and following detours. So I hopefully continue to do so in the years to come. Thank you very much.
So Milagros, you grew up in a climate of violence. So did I, actually. And how does it impact you as an artist to continually return to that? Is it a kind of exorcism, or is it just a fact of life that you continue to deal with?
Mm-hmm. Probably both, no? I don't know. I mean, I could be photographing roses for what, you know, you could think of, but somehow I just find myself doing research in such themes. It's just and one project leads, or one series leads to the next, and it's always, you know, somehow all integrated, and it makes sense, you know, that, for example, this triptych here that we're seeing, which was taken at the hospital for the mentally ill, in Lima relates very much to the bulletproof clothing that we saw, and there's a 10 years difference. So I think we just continue to just close that circle and hopefully still being able to work. No?
Is it a matter of finding the right historical object or the right historical archive and then developing a project, or do you have like a burning project that you want to do process-wise?
I think it comes differently. I mean, this is my experience. Of course, everybody's different. I just I start an idea. It's never, you know, a eureka thing. You know, I do lots of research. I do lots of reading. One reading would lead me to say another one that leads with philosophical concerns. For example, we were seeing that under the black sun, which is, you know, the wound on the face. So I would go to some authors that would deal with the face or with the, you know, with the physical wounds or psychological wounds, and things like continue to unroll for each project. But it, you know, that's the process I have. Sometimes it's fast. Sometimes it doesn't take more than 3 days to take the photographs. But I've been working on them, you know, a whole year before. Sometimes access is difficult, as in the censored series, where you have to deal with an institution and permissions and you know, technicalities. So it truly depends. Everything is, they're all different. This was at the American Society. Last year, last year.
Yeah.
So at the back you can see the lost steps, the ones that I was showing you from the evidence, and then in front it's the censored we were just talking about, and under the black sun here, and you can see that failed synchronized flash from the family portraits. And that's a piece I didn't show you, but it's just protection helmets, and it's a very large format piece, and it just deals with black and white and color photography. And when again, each series has some kind of historical reference to the medium. So, for example, here I was working out with the first color. The first colors when we started using color negative in comparison to the regular black and white. So here I'm referencing those two. There's always a technicality that I want to oversee in photography. So again, here you can see the armored. You see how small they are? Mm-hmm. Just the 5 pieces. I think that's it. Any other questions?
Have you ever considered using digital techniques to explore rather than the traditional darkroom techniques?
Oh yes, I have started. I have to say yes, I have started. The Imprint. Did you see those? The Imprint. It's one of my camera-based digital projects, but the first one was the big rectangles. I don't know if you remember where the text is in the bottom.
Yeah.
That was completely produced in a computer.
With the,
yes,
with the plexiglass in front.
Exactly. So that the mirror. Yes. So I truly, hopefully, wish to have the time to learn about it. You know, probably I'll be coming here to learn some great techniques. Yes. Of course. I mean, you can see. I mean, whoever is interested in photography, one should know that photography is just but a development of technical processes, one after the other one. No, we start with the daguerreotype, and then we continue tintype, and then we continue and continue and continue. And each time has a good response. I always like to think about photography portraying our human time, our human nature, and our times. So now, yes, it's digital. Now it's digital. So I'm thinking very much about it.
And I would add that it fails just as often as analog photography.
Which is good, right? Which is the idea about questioning.
Perfect for you,
yes,
yes.
perfect for me, yes. Yes.
So it seems like you, in many of your series, use objects to tell the story or to actually advise the general public of what's currently happening. Has there ever been an object that you photographed that you didn't want to let go of, or that you were so repulsed by that you never ever wanted to see again?
Ah, yes. Well, the objects normally don't belong to me. They normally belong to institutions, archives. So of course I cannot keep any of them. I don't know, probably about, there were some very strong objects at the archival of the Justice Palace, the evidence. There were some gruesome objects there. But somehow I never felt afraid of them. I think it's probably the upbringing of seeing all these extreme situations that somehow I'm very calm. I have a calm reaction towards them, so I can work really. I can take my time actually to look through and take that photograph. I really enjoy that when I have the time to think about what I'm seeing.
One more question. I have one more question.
Aha.
That's why I gave you the message.
You sensed it. Have you ever been stuck getting access? What was the most difficult
Yes.
access story
Yes.
that you have?
Actually, the most difficult was it's a series that I didn't include in my PowerPoint, but it was in Spain. It was the intimate objects of Francisco Franco. For those of you who know, he was a dictator in Spain, and a very intense dictator. But I wanted to to have his most intimate objects. So not the idea of the dictator, the big general, the person who would send to kill hundreds of people. But I wanted to see and to explore what were the objects that would make his heart stop. So there I had a big problem, twice actually. I went underground to see a Fundación Franco, which does only but celebrate whatever he did. But this is a bit underground. You never know where they are. And I went with the idea of looking into their archives, which I was led to. I had free access to their archives, but none of the objects were that intimate. They were all, piece of paper that he has signed, and so I knew that he has a daughter, and I wrote a letter to her, and I asked her, may I please have access to those precious objects that only probably you would have from your father, and I'm trying to do this series, so big letter, big recommendations, everything, and well, she never responded because she was going through a trial to give back some properties that she had taken from the Spanish government. So it was a very political time. So then I had to go to the Ministry of Culture in Spain and knock, try to gain access however way I could. ask friends. And finally, I get to him and I showed him my work and I tell him that this is, it's an exploration, artistic exploration. And he let me take some photographs of his bed, his pillow, some of his uniforms. And I think he used to confess. He was a strong Catholic every night, so where he would kneel and confess. And the table where he would sign all these death penalties. This was in a palace-like environment, so it was very strange that a general with such strange, strict beliefs would live so sumptuously. So that was the strongest one, I think. The most difficult one I had to get to, but I got the photographs, finally.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Milagros. It's
No,
been a
thank you.
pleasure.
Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.